Hi everyone. We just have a few things to go over before the test we haven't learned yet, so just going to be a quick video. We're going to learn about some important African Americans and also about something called eugenics that took place in the United States. So these are some of the African American leaders. Remember, African Americans faced a lot of discrimination and racism during this time. So one of the African Americans, her name is Ida B. Wells Barnett, and she led an anti-lynching crusade and called on the federal government to take action. So lynching, if you don't remember, that's where you would get a rope, which this is a rope right here, and they would put it around someone's neck and hang them from a tree, so that's how they would die. It happened to a lot of African Americans during this time, and she tried to get the federal government, the United States, to make laws so it wouldn't happen as much. A lot of people would hang African Americans and they never went to jail. Nothing really ever happened. So she was really big on anti-lynching, trying to get this to stop. Another leader his name was Booker T. Washington, and he believed the way to equality was through vocational education and economic success. So he thought if African Americans are going to be equal, they needed education, but they also needed money. They needed to be economically successful. And however, he accepted social separation or segregation. Remember, segregation just means separation, but he accepted that. He was fine with whites going to a different school, blacks going to a different school. He just wanted them to be equal. Whereas the last one we talk about, he's kind of the opposite of Booker T. Washington. His name is W.E.B. Du Bois, and he believed that African Americans should accept nothing less than a university education. So he said African Americans should be going to universities, they should be going to college, they should be educated, which is similar to what Booker T. Washington said, but he supported political equality for African Americans by helping to form the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So you guys maybe have heard of the NAACP, but the organization that tries to help African Americans, try to make sure they're equal, and he was against segregation. Remember, segregation just means separate. So he didn't like it that white kids went to one school, black kids went to a different school. The last thing we're going to talk about is something called eugenics in Virginia. It actually happened all around the country, but eugenics is the belief in the possibility of improving the qualities of human population by discouraging reproduction by individuals presumed to have undesirable traits and encouraging reproduction by those who had desirable inheritable traits. So essentially what this was, if somebody maybe was blind, if they had a mental illness, if they were born paralyzed or they were missing a leg, that's where they would have a surgery, whether it was a male or a female, and make sure that they could never have babies. So that's where it says undesirable. They considered, like I said, people who are blind, people who are deaf and couldn't hear, or people with mental illness. And they didn't want them to have kids because they didn't want their kids to have the same diseases. But they also did this to prisoners as well. If somebody was arrested and went to jail, they would sometimes have eugenics. They would have a surgery so they can never have kids. And it was a movement throughout the 20th century, worldwide as well as in Virginia, that demonstrated the misuse of the principles of heredity. So I mean, sometimes in this class, it's easy to think, like, this is really bad. How could America do this? Like, remember, it's slavery. Slavery wasn't just in the United States. There was slavery in Mexico. There was slavery in El Salvador. There was slavery in Honduras. There was slavery in Brazil. Slavery was almost in the whole entire world. Just like eugenics, this practice, where if somebody had an illness or something, they would make it so they couldn't have children. They did that as well. So it was worldwide, but it was practiced in Virginia. And there's an important court case. It's called Buck v. Bell, and it was in 1927. And the United States Supreme Court upheld a Virginia statute for the sterilization of people considered generally genetically unfit. So sterilization that's when you have a surgery done to make sure you don't have children. So sterilization, if you're sterile, you cannot have kids. So Virginia had this case and went to the Supreme Court, and they said, oh, that's fine, you're allowed to sterilize people if they're unfit. And Virginia's sterilization statute provided for similar laws in 30 states, which an estimated 65,000 Americans were sterilized without their own consent or that of a family member. So these people didn't have a choice. The government forced them to be sterilized, forced them to never have children. Like I said, it was a short video. That's it. Make sure you're working on the review. If you have any questions, let me know.